Today on our 2014 Chevrolet Silverado 1500, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Firestone Air Command 2 Standard Duty Compressor, part number F2178. We're going to be installing that in conjunction with the Firestone Ride-Rite air helper springs, part number F2430. This is what our control box looks like when it's installed. As you can see, it's going to have two knobs. This is going to be your driver's side. This is going to be your passenger side. This is going to allow you to adjust side to side or both at the same time. As you can see, you're going to have two different needles, one for your driver's side and one for your passenger side. As you can see, this goes up to 150 psi. However, you don't want to exceed the max psi on your bags. This is what our compressor looks like when it's installed. This is going to allow you to air up your bags without having to get out of your vehicle, and it simply runs directly off your 12-volt battery. What this system is going to allow you to do is going to allow you to level your truck if you have an off-centered load. As you can see, it's got a nice black finish, so it's going to fit with the inside of the vehicle. You can see it's going to have a white face, so it adds a nice touch to the vehicle. It's going to have a silver-colored ring. It's also going to come with an inside light. If you're loading or unloading at nighttime, it'll allow you to see your gauge to adjust your pressure. This kit's going to come with all the necessary hardware. Now that we've gone over some of the features, let's show you how to get it installed. First thing we need to do is find a place to mount our compressor. Now you want to make sure it's going to stay out of the way of getting hit with debris or getting a lot of dirt or mud or anything like that on it. It can be mounted underneath the vehicle on the frame. On this vehicle there's not a whole lot of space. So I came underneath the hood here, and there's an extra battery pan, which is going to be a great place to put it. Now your kit's going to come with some nuts and bolts for these. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use self-tapping screws to go into the plate there. Once you get one in, you're going to do the same thing with the remaining three holes. Now in your kit, you're going to have a wiring harness like this. You're going to have a red wire, an orange wire, and a white wire. The red wire is going to run over to a fuse, which is going to go to your battery. So you want to try and mount this as close to the battery as possible. Your orange wire is going to route to your compressor. And then your white wire is going to route inside the vehicle to the gauge. I'm going to take a self-tapping screw. I'm going to mount this right here. Gives me plenty of length for my red wire on my battery. Then I'm going to route my other end along the back here over to my compressor side, and I'll just zip tie it along this existing wiring. Now we need to find a mounting location for the other end of our wiring harness. I'm going to put it right about there. You want to make sure that the plug, you don't mount it upside down. Make sure you mount it like this so that any water or moisture that potentially gets on here will run off of it and not run down into the plug. I'm just going to take my extra red wire here. I'll bundle it up. I'm going to zip tie it to this existing wiring. Just kind of clean it up a little bit. Orange wire connect to our red wire, just like that. And then our black wire is going to be a ground. If you can't ground it to the battery, you want to make sure you ground it to any metal on the vehicle, metal framing, metal body parts. I'm going to mount my ground wire right here. So now we need to figure out how we're going to run our white wire and then our airline tubes from our bags inside to our switch. So there's a large ground right here on our firewall. You need to make sure before you poke any holes in it that you go inside the vehicle and make sure there's not anything on the other side that you're going to push into. I'm just going to cut a little slit in it right now, just like this. I'm going to take some airline tube that I have laying around, and what I did is I cut it into a point like that. Push it in. See if we can't push it through the other side. I'm going to take my white wire and take some electrical tape, tape it onto my Airline tubing here. It's going to make it easier to pull it through. And I'll come inside, pull. Just like that. Next thing we need to do is we need to run our airlines from our bags up to the front of the vehicle and inside to our switch. Now, our customer, even though he has the compressor, he chose to have 2 valves put in the back. So we added a T-connector, ran a line back to the back to the valves. Now we're going to run our line up to the front. One thing I suggest is marking your lines with 2 different colors. So you know when you get your line inside, which one's your passenger and which one's your driver's side. When you hook it up to your switch, you got it hooked up right. I'm going to mark my driver's side with black. And I'm going to do it actually at both ends. Let me route this driver's side line real quick and I'll show you how I did it. For my passenger side, I ran right up here, ran across this brace. I did zip tie it here to make sure it stays away from my shock, and I zip tied it here to make sure I don't have any movement in the line. Ran it right over top of my gas tank and met it with my driver's side line. What I did is I found some existing wiring here on the driver's side, ran it behind both of these brackets, ran it up along, zip tied along the existing wiring all the way up to the front, right inside the front wheel. From here we're going to follow the same factory wiring up to our engine compartment. I'll run my airlines through my grommet to the inside of the vehicle. Now from our gauge we're going to have one line that we need to run outside to the compressor. You can see I did the same thing, only this one I did white. So I'm going to tape it to my airline tube, my black one that I had run in earlier. We left it in place. We're going to have another fitting. It's going to go in our compressor. Again, we'll tighten it down. We want that coating on the threads to seat inside. Make sure we don't have any leaks. Go ahead and connect this to the compressor, and it's going to go in this valve right here. Push it in. Now we're going to install our air filter. We're going to use a small piece of hose. It might be a good idea if you soak this in some hot water first, just to soften it up so it'll slide over the ends of it. So next we need to mount our gauge, and our customer wanted it mounted right here in the center next to his brake controller. Now we're going to have 2 black wires coming off our switch. One's going to be a ground and one's going to go to a light source. Go ahead and strip a little bit more off of each of those. Because they're so thin, I'm going to double them over. I'm going to put a butt connector on each one, because where we are mounting it, I'm going to have to extend the wire to get to a good ground. Butt connector on the other one. And then we'll just connect our extension on the other side. Now I'm going to take one of my wires, strip back the other end, and I'm going to add a ring terminal on it for my ground wire. So I'm going to route my hoses over where I'm going to be mounting my control. Now that I have my tubes run over, I'm going to cut them down to size, but before doing that, I want to make sure I mark them again up here so I know what goes where. Next I'm going to run my white wire around. Now our white wire's pretty long, so I'm going to cut it down about the same size as my hoses. Get about there. It leaves me a little bit extra. And I'm going to take this extra white wire, and I'm actually going to have another ground that's coming off of my control unit. So I'm going to use that to run my other ground wire. So we're going to have 2 white wires coming off the back of our control switch. Per our instructions, this bottom one is going to be our ground. So we'll go ahead and connect our butt connector to it. And we're going to connect it to the other butt connector on the other set of our white wires. So now our white hose is going out to our compressor. It's going to go right in the center. And then my black to my driver's side. Now I'm just going to use some self-tapping screws to put this in place. What I did is I routed my wires across underneath the dash. And I'm going to put my 2 grounds in here. But in order to do that, I have to go through the side, which there's a panel over here on this side, pop off, there's a hole, and it'll run down right behind this panel here. My wires will stay hidden and it won't be in the way of my brake or my emergency brake pedal. Pop this off like that. It's from here. Now I have my ground wire and my white wire, which is my other ground. There's not an existing bolt here, so I'm going to cut these right here. I'm actually going to tie these together and put 1 ring terminal on for my ground. Then I can ground it right there. That. Now our other black wire needs to go to a light source. Now because our switches in our dash are very low voltage, I'm going to make it easy. Right underneath the floor there's a grommet. You can see that grommet there. I'm going to run this outside and run it to the back to my license plate light. So I'm going to have to extend it, strip the end, and add a butt connector. Same thing with my extra wire. Let me go ahead and run some electrical tape around that. Now we can route our wire back to the back. I'm just going to follow my airlines here. So our green wire with our yellow stripe, that's going to be for our license plate light. So what we're going to do is we're going to split it. We're going to strip both ends. Put in our butt connector. We'll strip back our other side here. So you can see our lights are working. Now let's test out our compressor and our bags. And that'll do it for a look at and installation on the Firestone Air Command 2 Standard Duty Compressor, part number F2178 on our 2014 Chevrolet Silverado 1500.
Thanks for watching, and click the link in our description below to shop, learn more, or visit us at eTrailer.com. And leave us a comment if you have any questions.